Tucker Carlson was recently spotted in Russia, where for some reason a journalist interviewing a world leader has the mainstream media panicked.
Can I ask you about your interview with Putin?
With who?
With Putin.
I've heard the name, but
With our President Putin.
Yeah, it sounds familiar, but I don't.
As the mainstream dinosaur media quickly put their spin on Carlson.
In fact, one of the leaders of the MAGA GOP is in Moscow tonight. It's the man you see here with the MAGA leader Donald Trump, Tucker Carlson. Possibly there in Moscow to interview Putin. Definitely there as a Putin-supporting celebrity.
But as Tucker finally confirmed his interview with Putin, most people understand why he's doing it.
We're in Moscow tonight. We're here to interview the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin. Here's why we're doing it. 2 years into a war that's reshaping the entire world, most Americans are not informed. They have no real idea what's happening in this region, but they should know. They're paying for much of it. Most Americans have no idea why Putin invaded Ukraine or what his goals are now. They've never heard his voice. That's wrong. Americans have a right to know all they can about a war they're implicated in. And we have the right to tell them about it because we are Americans too. Freedom of speech is our birthright. We are not encouraging you to agree with what Putin may say in this interview, but we are urging you to watch it. You should know as much as you can. And then, like a free citizen and not a slave, you can decide for yourself.
And here's the thing, I can completely buy the idea that Russia is America's enemy and they're doing terrible things overseas that need to be stopped. My issue is, if you constantly tell me someone is a really bad guy, but for some reason I'm not allowed to hear what that bad guy is saying, just that you say he's really bad and I just have to trust what you're saying about what he's saying, something doesn't quite add up here. Claiming Carlson is going to promote Putin's propaganda and Americans would be too stupid to see it is awfully ironic to say, right after they run segments about our own thriving economy while their viewers fall deeper into debt. Because journalism is basically dead, as interviewing a world leader in an extremely dangerous situation is something journalists used to aspire to do by building their careers through bravery. But looking at the front page of MSNBC right now, there's nothing about it. The front page of CNN has nothing about the interview, except one small story about Tucker Carlson's habits in Russia, where they just use this as an opportunity to explain that he's just a far-right journalist. And even Tucker's former employer in Fox News doesn't have anything about it on their front page, without a single mention of Tucker, which is awfully strange because these corporate media outlets have been assuring me that the tens of billions of our tax dollars have been spent on destroying his country on the Eastern Front. Shouldn't we be able to see how bad his morale has become? Or is this just the go-to move the media makes when their narrative doesn't quite match up with reality? Because censoring world leaders is just what they do. When Trump won the Iowa caucus, CNN did this.
Although here he is right now under my voice, you hear him repeating his anti-immigrant rhetoric.
And that wasn't the only instance.
We're not carrying his remarks live because, frankly, he says a lot of things that are not true and sometimes potentially dangerous.
And not just CNN, but MSNBC too.
The projected winner of the Iowa caucuses has just started giving his victory speech. Of course, there is a reason that we and other news organizations have generally stopped giving an unfiltered live platform to remarks by former President Trump. It is not out of spite. There is a cost to us as a news organization of knowingly broadcasting untrue things. Now we know that the vaccines work well enough that the virus stops with every vaccinated person. That is a fundamental truth of our business and who we are. And so his remarks tonight will not air here live. We will monitor them.
Which is nothing new to MSNBC, as back in 2020, they did the same.
Iowa, Indiana, Ohio.
Okay, here we are again in the unusual position of not only interrupting the President of the United States, but correcting the President of the United States.
And even supposedly conservative Fox News does it too.
And then, no.
Well, the former president finally got around to some campaign promises amid lots of cheering, as you heard. Many untruths. The 2020 election was not rigged. It was not stolen.
So when Trump says it, censor it. But this this is perfectly fine.
I believe he knows he's an illegitimate president. He knows that there were a bunch of different reasons why the election turned out the way it did.
So if Trump is truly this terrible liar, why won't they just let him lie and quickly provide the proof as to how he's contradicting the truth and just make him look like a buffoon? If he was really doing this, it seems like they're passing up an easy win. So they can claim Trump is terrible all they want, but at some point in time they're going to have to actually show him doing it and not just referencing each other's garbage gossip in an echo chamber. As I remember eating at a restaurant in Los Angeles around the 2020 election, I was just watching a stream of Trump speaking to the nation, and my waiter, peeking over my shoulder onto my phone, pompously said, "Hey, just so you know, Fox is fake news." And I remember almost saying, "It's a speech, it's gonna be the same everywhere," or even being mean and making a remark about the current dining dynamic that we're in. But I recall just silently pausing for a moment and just looking at him, seeing him as a guy that was so far deep into his echo chamber that even catching a glimpse of what's beyond his programming was enough to freak him out, forfeit any opportunity at a tip just to pledge his allegiance to his preferred mainstream media outlet. So I didn't say a thing and just felt sorry for the server that was somehow convinced into North Korean levels of loyalty to a news station. Because let's be clear, I think Fox News is garbage too, as they all align with their official talking points when it really comes down to it.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities.
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
So when everybody from CNN to Fox News says we cannot allow our viewers to hear what the president is saying, is it because we suddenly don't have the capacity to hear his lies in between all their lies, or is it because they're so desperate to protect their carefully curated narrative that they will actually limit the speech of a president, domestic or foreign? Because I think it's all connected to this.
I'm wearing my Ukraine tie, my Ukraine pin, which I've been wearing because they're in dire straits right now. Every week, every month that passes without new aid Ukraine means fewer artillery shells, fewer air defense systems, fewer tools for Ukraine to defend itself against this Russian onslaught. Just what Putin wants.
Now, I simply can't recall a single time a president anywhere has preached to his own people while decked out in another country's drip, demanding $60 billion of their tax dollars be sent to the country that he's currently representing, like some NASCAR driver proudly sporting his corporate sponsors. Because let's be clear, this border security bill he's promoting also says it provides a fraction of its spending on the American border.
All indications are this bill won't even move forward to the Senate floor. Why? A simple reason. Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump thinks it's bad for him politically. Therefore, he doesn't, even though it helps the country, he's not for it. He'd rather weaponize this issue than actually solve it.
And the irony in this statement has so many meanings it's almost poetic. Claiming Trump will weaponize the border crisis while he's literally packaging the border crisis with actual weapons he's sending overseas is peak levels of self-snitching. Never mind the fact that the Biden administration assured us in 2021 that there was no border crisis. 2022, we still have the most secure borders ever. In 2023, there is absolutely no crisis at the border. But suddenly, when election season comes up, it's now Trump's fault that we've had this crisis at the border for the last 4 years. Now, it's incredibly clear the man that wasn't even allowed to make a Facebook account doesn't have much control over the border, let alone the Republican Party that's seemingly desperate to knock him out the presidential race. But if you exist in an entirely controlled echo chamber where you haven't heard a word Trump has actually said in the last 4 years, in that circumstance, you could probably believe that Trump is causing the border crisis. Because in a carefully curated bubble, your reality is whatever they tell you. And knowing all these things they're trying to make you believe about the border and Trump, I really wonder why they're freaking out about Tucker interviewing the other president they've villainized in the media. And I'm not automatically going to assume that he's some great guy, I'm just questioning why we're not even allowed to verify. And notice how I covered this topic. Videos with what Tucker said, and then what his opposition in the mainstream media said, and then looked into why specific outlets cover this story in that particular way. And if you've watched this channel for any amount of time, you've known that I just follow the story wherever it goes. Sometimes I'm confirming that a sports journalist is a race grifter, and sometimes I'm debunking that a sports podcaster is a race grifter. Without a corporate sponsor giving the channel an official agenda, we're free to just see what's actually happening around us. And unfortunately, I don't think a single mainstream corporate media outlet is free to do the same. So if you appreciate my concise, lighthearted commentary on the tragic status that is today's reality, hopefully I've earned your subscription, then go check out the video on how a San Diego surfer accidentally caught the invasion of California on camera.